Okay, welcome to STM. I know I didn't do a lecture on this because it's not much to lecture, it's much to show. So I'm just going straight to a lab on it, and I didn't figure out where to put this in the video series, so we decided to put it at the end. When you bring it up, if you have debugging on it, it's going to bring that. That doesn't mean it's bad, so I'm just going to say OK. Now I'm using the demo as shown in my book. If you want to know how to load this demo, please see my book. Also go to lamley.com forum, and it'll talk about the different problems that are found with this as you're trying to load it on Vista, trying to load it on a Mac, and just trying to download the new darn thing. But it's going to look something like this when you go into a new ISR router. This is connected to a 2801 router, and I highly recommend that you get one of these routers or at least run through this demo. Again, the CCNA objectives on this are light, but again, that can change at any time. Just like the IPv6 objectives are light, but again, that can change at any time. You could come up, take a test, and see nothing but IPv6. Who knows? So you have to be prepared for everything. That's what makes this test so hard. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through here. Here's the home, and this is first going to talk about my feature availability. IP, I have firewall, VPNs typically on. This has NAC, network access control, so that's pretty good. But we don't have IPS. Remember I told you how expensive that is. SDM version, my iOS version is 12.4. Typically you're going to have a new ISR router running 12.4. 2801, 61 megs of flash, probably 64 megs of flash actually. I have two LAN interfaces configured, total supported WAN, one sync, one ADSL connection, and two WAN connections. Alright, so firewall policy is active, and so we can put that down. Here's my VPN. I have nothing configured, but I do have a VPN module in here. Nothing configured as of routing. So this is just about our router. This is, I can come from here and say view running config. We do not have to go to the command line interface. However, to me, it's a lot easier. Maybe not to you. I don't know. Anyway, so we can see our show running config. It's going to do it for us. We can save our config. We can change our running config. This has a lot of information we haven't talked about, nor do we need to. IP inspect. So it has the security module running. I actually show this, I think, in my book and what this is. And there's a certificate that's used because I'm using HTTPS to talk to the router. As a matter of fact, this is enabled by default on all ISR routers. Remember how I discussed earlier that you don't go into setup mode on the new routers. There is a small configuration. One of them is so you can go in, do SDDM with HTTPS. It is there. If you're not going to use SDM, I recommend just erase start reload. If you are, then obviously don't want to. And all of this is security. Boy, we got a lot in this, don't we? Look at all this stuff. This is way too much we need to know for CCNA. Just keep remembering that. This looks like it has a lot of map. This is a policy map for voice. Way more we need to know. Do we see anything in here that we've even done? This is crypto keys for IPsec. Go on and on and on. There's a lot of config in here. There's an ATM interface, which we could care less about for the CCNA objectives, or any CCNA objectives actually for any test. Here's a fast Ethernet 00 firewall outside, and so there's an access group, an IP address, and so on, IP NAT outside. And that's all we need to know, but there's a lot more here, isn't there? Wow, are you sorry that you even looked at this? We need to have IP HTTP secure server enabled. By default, I think this is disabled to run HTTPS, depends on the router. IP HTTP server, IP HTTP authentication local. Means we're going to use the usernames, aren't we? And here's my access list. I did mention they can get kind of long. How do I edit this list? Well, I have to say no access list 100. There's an access list 1 and access list 100, isn't there? So I'd say no access list 100, change it, and then paste it back in. And I am not kidding you. There's a 101 radius. There's a banner. The password is Cisco to get in. This is what you're going to see when you log into an ISR router right now. So you can connect up with HTTPS. I think it's 10.0.0.1 if I'm not mistaken. And let me go verify for one on the fast Ethernet 00. If I can find it on here. I'll verify it on the interface inside. But anyways, we see this banner. Transport input telnet and SSH. So you can add telnet and SSH into here. We only want to do SSH, don't we? But we can put telnet in there if we have to send traffic that is not encrypted. So this is what you see on a router. Let me close on an ISR router. When you log in, it'll tell you how to log in, and again, the password is Cisco. Pretty sure it's 10.0.0.1 one. I am using the demo. Anyways, so we can configure new connections. So we can say create new connection. Here's our router, and it's connected via DSL. So we can see there's an ADSL that we can configure. We can edit the interface. We have 2 fast Ethernets. Here's my inside IP, because look, it's got an IP address, and we're using this probably as our outside address. So here's my ATM. I'm not recommending saying go out and buy anything with ATM. Now I can click on this, and it'll give me information all about this interface. There is a lot of information on here about our routers, and I just double click that interface that you don't have to know for the CCNA. But here's how I can change my IP address and associate to an access list, VPN policy or inspection rule. Again, are we using NAT? In this case, it's inside or outside or none. It's pretty easy here. And here's what's turned on by default. Notice IP proxy ARP. If I want to do forward broadcast, which I don't recommend, you can click IP directed broadcasts. And IP redirects, we're going to get... the reason that you would even turn this off is because it can be a security risk. Someone could send something to resend package to the same interface on which it was received. We don't want to do that. IP unreachable, same thing. We probably want to turn those off as well. Application, this is for QoS. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do here on each. It thinks that I made some changes, so anyways, it wants to update the running config. There's a lot of stuff here. We can delete the interface, edit the interface, add an interface, and so on. So this is interface and connections. We can test the connection. It'll tell us. We can say start. So this will check our interface settings, and I recommend, we're going to fail because I don't think this thing's actually, the DNS failed. Lookup, DNS configuration checked has failed. No DNS lookup has been configured. That doesn't necessarily mean a problem. It just means we haven't gone and set up a IP domain -lookup command, right? So if we create connection, we'll say create new connection. And since we already configured our fast Ethernets. The only thing left is this. Let me come back here for a second. Our fast Ethernets are already configured, so we can see what's configured. Our ATM and our fast Ethernets, these right here are sub-interfaces, and the tunnel is not a physical interface. So we have an asynchronous, an ATM, and 2 fast Ethernets. And these are already configured, so they're not going to show up under create connection, but let's go ahead and do this. And we could use PPPoE, that's fine, PPPoA over ATM. So we'll say PPPoE, or interface ATM 030. And this is going to be, we have to get this stuff from our service provider, virtual path identifier. I think I'm doing this right. Yep. Static IP address and dynamic easy IP negotiate is what you want to do. Dynamic DNS. And then username and password from our provider as well, and using CHAP or PAP. It's hard to believe they would even let you use PAP. And that's it. So not much that we did there, but we just changed that interface and added that interface and configured it. So let's go ahead. If we delete this here, see if this lets us do this. Okay, delete the interface, fast Ethernet 00. Hopefully it'll delete all of that. Put that in trash. So it is down. This hopefully now it'll let us create a new connection on Ethernet LAN. There's a reason I want to show you this, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Okay, so do I want this for routing or for trunking? This is nice. Is it going into a switch and create trunking where we could do sub interfaces? Wow, it'll walk us right through that, sub interfaces. So that's kind of nice. Anyways, here's my IP address, and I could choose this and go /24, right? And do it like that. We'll just do that because that's not the important part I want to show you. It's how to put an IP address in mask. I want to enable a DHCP server on here. This is really what I want to show you so much on this whole SDM. How do I make this interface a DHCP server? Now we know we can go create the pool with the CLI, but let's go ahead and do it this way. That's 10.1.1. I think I named it that. So we'll start it with 2 and 10.1.1.254. And DNS server. We have a DNS server. It's 1.1.1.1. And we're using a Win server too. And the domain name is lamley.com. So we can see that this is no different than when we went into our CLI. The CLI, I think, is actually easier for me. But this is how how I can do it through here, through a LAN. I can put an IP address on there and put a DNA server pool. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the running config and see what we see. See if it created the pool for us. So, not much on here because we took everything off, which is kind of nice. Let's go look at the running config. Let's go back to home. So we should see the pool up on top. I don't know, on the top of this router, there's so much stuff here. There's my username, Tess. So we have 2 usernames. Okay. I didn't see it. Did we save it? I think we saved it. No, it's there. I need to erase all this and so we can actually start from the beginning with this, but it's very important that you can go to an interface and create a DHCP pool. And it was actually pretty simple, wasn't it? All right, let's take a look at NAT. So we can do some basic NAT and launch the selected task so we don't have to type it in from the interface or from the CLI and add it to our interfaces. This will do it for us. Okay, we're going to say details. Choose the interface that connects to the internet or your service provider. This is the one that we configured. We need to have 2 interfaces, so we're going to say 00. See what I see? Okay. Oh yeah, we want these guys to get out to the interface here through Fast Ethernet 00. So it's basically saying these get out to the internet. Was I doing Fast Ethernet 00? There we go. This is going to do our inside and outside and create this pool, and it's going to do the whole thing for us. That seems a little bit easier than what we did, as long as I understand which one's my inside and outside interface. And with this router having so much configuration on it already, that was somewhat hard to see. But once you decide which one's your inside and outside interface, blam, that's pretty easy. So not much, that we need to do here. So we can see designate NAT interface and come in here and edit and so on. So here's our inside and outside, trusted and untrusted. We can change them at any time. We can use the NAT GUI, or we could just do it by hand by doing it this way. So either way, there's a lot more that we can do. Let's go into routing, and we could say we want to add routing. What do we want to do? RIP is disabled. I'd like to enable it. So enable RIP. And we're going to do version 2, because that's much better, right? Now, this is not which interfaces you want to run it on. If we click here, it's which interfaces do we not want to run it on. So make the interface passive means we don't want to send RIP out that interface. Oh, I need to add a network. Okay, I've added my network. I'm going to say OK. And now RIP should be configured, delivered to the router, so it says. I'm sure that it has. It's just hard to see in this darn running config. And I think we should turn on OSPF. We've always had a problem with that, haven't we? Let's see if we can add, okay, we don't want it, these are which interfaces don't we want to run OSPF on? I don't want to run them on my dialer interfaces, okay? Why would I? And process ID we make up. Remember, it's any number that we feel like making. We have to add that. Now network. So this didn't really make it much easier, did it? Because we still have to remember our wildcards. So, I don't know. This is another way to do it. Area not valid. Oh, it's because I typed in area 0. They just want 0. Okay, so again, I'm not sure that these are easier, but it is a way to do it. We'll turn on EIGRP now. We want the autonomous system number, and we're going to say 10. I like that. My network number is 10.0.0.0. We can use a wildcard mask, but we certainly don't have to with EIGRP, and I don't recommend it. It does cause confusion, and it doesn't make it run any difference. All right, so we can configure RIP, OSPF, and EIGRP, RIP version 1 and 2, and we certainly can do static routing as well. So we can add a route right here under static routing, or we can edit the one that's here or delete and so on. So we actually can do everything we did in this class. Now notice that it's missing things like BGP or ISIS. Those are not involved in this. Okay, so let's take a look. Where can I set my administrative functions? Well, that's a hard question. We're going to have to go here down to additional tasks and say router properties. We can't add all of them. So we can add some of them, but it's easier to go to the CLI. But here's the host name, my domain name. So I can click on here and change my domain name, I guess. Or not. Yes, so here it is right here. So I just clicked on host name. It lets me check my host and domain and set my banner. So I guess where I now is I can set my enable secret. But one thing I've never found in here is where I set my console password or where I set my line BTY passwords or anything like that. So good luck with that if you find it, if you need to find it. Now config editor is kind of cool actually. Allows you to change router configurations without using SDM Wizard at Windows. So save running config to use it. This allows me to come in here and let's see what we have. See if we can take something out. So we can add it. We can import here, running config to here. And now we can say save to PC. What's kind of nice about this is we'll just save it to the desktop. SDM config February 28th, 2008, I guess it is. Anyways, we just saved our config to our PC. Now we can do this every time we open up SDM. We can save this. It doesn't matter where our router is. We're going to save it to a folder on our PC. Now also we can set it back to factory defaults. Now I installed SDM on the PC. You have to go to the router and load the SDM from the router, which I don't like to do. So I can't reset to factory defaults from here. I have to go to the CLI. Again, you cannot do everything. Now, again, it says merge with running config or replace with running config. So I'm going to import from the PC. So if I go to my PC and open that, I can edit it. Just like a TFTP host. See, it's just a notepad. Yeah, it's kind of large. Anyways, so we can go ahead and edit this. This is a heck of a config. Anyways, and then we can say merge. So this is a copy TFTP run, right? Isn't that kind of what this is? It sure is. All right, so this is kind of cool. I can set up my dynamic DNS methods, DNS servers, and DHCP pool. So here's my DHCP pool that I created earlier, remember that? And I can create more here. And I can take a look and see my bindings and what clients on there. So I can add more pools here and assign them to an interface. But I want you to remember that we go to interface, I created the interface, I set the IP address, and then I created the pool on there the same way. We need to know how to do that. Okay, and router access, I guess this is where I would set my VTY password, right? Let's see if it allows me to do that. I still don't see it. This is my line range and setting access rules to them, right? Output protocol in SSH, I can turn off telnet. That's kind of nice. So I can do some things here. But I don't see anything where it let me change my password still. My SDM crashed. I didn't mention it was a perfect application, so I'm going to relaunch it. And since I'm using the demo, I put in 127.0.0.1. You typically would put in the actual IP address of the router, right? So let's see what we have here. Should come up. This does take a minute to come up. And 127.0.0.1. Sure, we'll use HTTPS. Doesn't make any difference. So this is going to start and hopefully bring up another file. Phew. So I'm always grateful when this comes up. This is one screen that comes up that has to stay up. This one back here does not. This one has to stay up in the background. SDM opens in another window. Let me show you that again. And do not close this window until you exit SDM. Okay, so we'll come back here again. We can do some monitoring of logging, interface status, IPS status, NAC, traffic status, VPN, firewall status, and just a basic overview. And that's what we're looking at now. So there's a lot of great stuff that we can see here. But let's go back to configure. This is where we really want to stay. Where was I? Let's go down here and open this full. And hit this. And hit additional tasks. I want to see if I could set the VTY password, which I was never able to find before. And where did we find that? Router access. And it made me crash last time I touched this, so let's see if it'll make me crash again. Yeah, this is not let me change this. So again, I can't find a way to set this or the console. So see if management access, add. Oh, those are policies. Okay. And we can set up users, by the way, for the usernames and usernames, passwords, and privilege level. We can set the privilege level where 1 is user mode and 15 is, or 0 is user mode and 15 is privileged mode. So we can add new usernames this way. It's just as easy to go to the CLI for a lot of the stuff, and this is one of those. So again, router properties are nice. We can start here. Not much we can do from router access. User account configuration is nice. VTY line configuration, we can specify SSH or VTY, but we still have to go to, looks like the CLI, as far as I know, to set the passwords. But remember, if we're using SSH, it would be done in the user account, so we don't need to set the passwords on our VTY lines, but we still would on our console. All right, now let's see one more thing on the SSH. It's going to let us to operate a key. SSH is enabled, already has a key, or we could generate a key there. So that's about it from the configuration management. Let's check one more thing on interfaces and connections. Let's just go through this again. I want to delete this, and I want to do it a different way. Okay, sure that's deleted. And I want to show you another way. Ethernet LAN, create new connection. So one last thing. And you must get this yourself and play through it. But we're going to configure it for chunking. Doesn't that sound fun? And remember, we did this by hand. And the only problem that I had, 802.1q configuration, the native VLAN is default, so we're just going to use the native VLAN. And that is, what, 1. This means that it won't be tagged with any traffic. So the native VLAN, that's just basically saying, hey, anything sent down the trunk link that doesn't have an ISL or 802.1q, and that's what we have here, is just native and meant for VLAN 1 in this case. So the first one's IP address. And on our trusted interface, do we want DHCP? No. And so now we have that fixed up. It's not as good as what we did on the CLI, but it did let me configure this to have 802.1 trunking on here. So we only have one sub interface, and we probably need to create another and want to see if it'll allow us. And here we go right here. And this is not going to be native. So this is going to be VLAN 2 and the IP address. Okay, now we have 2 sub interfaces, each with IP addresses. So we're all good to go. So these would be our default gateways for our devices outside VLAN 1 and 2. VLAN 1, again, I set it as native, meaning it's really untagged traffic. Any traffic that's not tagged coming across the trunk, we will send it to the native VLAN 1. By default, that's what it is on all switches. Okay, that's all I really want to show you. Again, we went through the NAT already, but for SDM, the best thing, why I didn't make a whole module out of this, is the only thing you can do is really go through it. The best thing is get your own router and play with it. It does take a little work with it. It is a little quirky. It does crash at times. There is a new version out. Be careful if you're trying to load what I'm loading, which is the demo. Please look at the mylandly.com and the forum and look up the SDM, because there is a long post on this, a lot of posts on how to make this work with Vista, as well as if you download the newest SDM, the demo doesn't work with it. So I happen to have an older SDM. It's about not quite a year old, maybe about 8 months old, and it still works with the SDM demo. So just be aware of that when you download the SDM and the demo, when you look in my book, to look for the updates on the forum at landly.com. And thanks a lot for sticking through me through all these videos, if you did. And if you did, please keep in touch with me at my forum at landly.com. That's where you can get in touch with me and leave me messages. Thanks, and have a great day.